Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome Director Alexandra Brodski, who joins us to talk about their work on Half Man. Alexandra will talk us through her work on episodes 1 to 3 of the show. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Alexandra. Hi Alex, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
We're here to talk about Half Man that's recently come out on HBO and BBC in the UK. Before we sort of jump into the sort of nitty-gritty of the show, how have you found the reception to the show? Because only recently there was screening at Cannes. It all must be quite surreal at the moment, and I'm guessing some of it hasn't really sunk in either.
Yeah, it is quite surreal, I have to say, because for such a long time, it was mostly like me and Richard, and then our exec Sophie Sanders, like in an edit somewhere in Glasgow by ourselves. Then which was like the editor or then the mixer, but there are barely any people who would be like with you experiencing the show. And now we had like three big screenings in New York and Cannes and the Palais de Festi. No, cinema. Yes, what's this big cinema called? Palais
In
de
where?
Festival. I think the big screen, the big cinema in wait, can I look it up actually? Can you ask me
Yeah,
the question again? Because it's so embarrassing because I keep getting asked this and I keep forgetting how the
yeah, it's okay. You could carry on. You could add it in. I could just cut around it. It's fine.
Palais de Festival it's called. Yeah, exactly. So we were screened in this like big cinemas, and it's just so extraordinary to get to watch actually your TV show on a big screen with other people, because it's obviously not really how it's meant to be watched, but it was such a rewarding, amazing experience to just see like and feel the reactions of people to the scenes we've been working on for so long. So it's quite incredible. Actually, I'm really grateful for it.
I think as well, like if you are experiencing that, it's polar opposites, isn't it? If you're in Glasgow, where let's be honest, it's quite the weather's not great, to then going to like sunny Cannes and then being
It's quite
there,
fun.
just like probably also the fact that like when you go into the edit as well, you're not dressed to the nines like you would be for Cannes, where you're all dressed up,
What do you
suited and
mean?
booted.
I'm dressed in my like best gown every time I go to the edit.
I think for the audience members, Alex is still in her Cannes outfit.
100%.
Never coming off because I need to keep it alive, um, keep the
Yeah.
movement going. Just to go back to the beginning, how did the project come about and what made you want to take it on?
So I got the first two episodes. My agent sent me the first two episodes 3 years ago, I think. And I read the episodes and I just so fell in love with them. I think I rarely read something which was so close to my taste. And I actually quite specifically remember one moment I read in episode one, which is the scene where Ruben chokes Nile, and then the choke turns into a hug. And for me, I just had such like a visceral reaction to it, because it's such it captures for me the feeling of the show so much, like of this violence and tenderness and empathy and rage. And I found the tone and the characters and the relationship so complicated, and there's so much darkness in it, but I also saw quite a lot of light in it. And I think like from this moment on I just got completely obsessed that I want to direct this. So and then I did a big pitch deck where I for about 2 weeks collected a loads of like visual materials and street photography and basically anything which would help me to capture the feeling I had when I was reading the scripts, and then met Richard and presented him the pitch deck, and we started talking about it. And I think we felt just very aligned on creative vision on it. So that's how it started.
When you have your pitch decks, because you're saying about was looking at street photography, are there any photographers that you're specifically looking at, or was it just sitting there flicking through books and the internet and just thinking, this is perfect, this is exactly what I have in mind, to sort of describe the visual look and the aid of I want to go for these episodes?
I think it's always both. Like I have a kind of collection of things I like. I have photography books and things I'm drawn to, I guess, taste-wise. And then I'm always looking for new things as well. So I think it's a mixture of things I'm anyways collecting and things which then resonate with me based on the project I'm engaging with.
Okay, cool. I think for me, it's always the research side when I'm talking to different creatives. I find it's sort of the most interesting because it's the inspiration that people are taking from. And then also sometimes I'll mention a photographer and it's like quickly have a Google and then you kind of put the two and two together and what they were trying to create and what they took from the inspiration. I've started looking at more like paintings and photographers as well because there's always I know they say a picture paints 1,000 words, but there's always so much that your mind can go to see like why is that car parked so funnily? Like what could that mean? And then your mind can race to something else, or in the case of like certain years and errors as well.
100%. And I think I looked at a lot, for example, there's a photographer called Lisa Safati who went through, I actually think, so she isn't Russian, but she went through this big trip through Russia and did this like amazing photography. And I think a lot of inspiration I took for the show was from there because it was kind of it's social realism, but it has always quite a lot of color in it and a lot of patterns and textures. And we tried to recreate that look. And actually, I went to Glasgow before our like actual prep started and met with our production designer Emo O'Sullivan, and we spent a week looking at a lot of these materials and also actually analyzing the pictures, what exactly it is about the pictures we like. Because I think so often it can happen that you, let's say, present pictures and I'm looking at one thing, but the person I'm collaborating with is looking at another thing. And we might never fully figure out what it is, what is actually the inspiration of what we're talking about. So I think it's really useful to actually discuss in so much detail than the references you're using to figure out what is it about the image which creates the feeling I'm looking for. Is it the combination of the light, the cold light and the warm setting, or is it the combination of patterns but then also the patterns somehow match with each other so it's not an overwhelming image. So I really believe in references, but just as conversation starters to then properly discuss what you're looking for.
Yeah, and you're right that like one person will see one thing whilst you will see another, and you might be just looking at a specific corner and they're like, actually, I was looking at the corner at the top rather than at the bottom. And you're like, okay, I didn't actually notice that part. Or then you sort of have to get aligned to what you both want to look for, especially when it comes to like production design, because the show is set over two different periods. Was set, and you kind of have to get a I think it probably the now period is probably a little bit easier to design because you can see everything straight away, whilst looking at stuff in the past, there's probably like a skewed sort of version of it because it can be like nostalgia or could be a harder time for people to like connect to, especially with like the social aspect of things as well, as we see in the show. But sort of stepping away from the look of it, I know the show explores some really heavy subjects and themes, and you mentioned it about the anger and certain moments that really stood out for you. But as a director, how do you go about working with actors who are playing the same role but in two different time periods?
Yeah, so because in the first block I mostly worked with Stuart and Mitchell, and then we obviously had like this other present day storyline with Jamie and Richard. So at some point it got clear that Richard was going to be Ruben. And I think the summer before we started shooting, we cast Jamie as Niall. And then we just I mean, Richard was there anyway, obviously, so he was very much like involved in everything and seeing the transitions. And with Jamie, we tried to keep him involved. He was watching material from set to see what Mitchell is doing, so he could copy certain, not copy, but like interpret certain mannerisms and kind of capture a bit the spirit of what Mitchell was doing as the young version and carried on in the more adult time. So they were both just doing kind of their homework in terms of figuring out how to progress the character. I think with all of them, we've been talking that I thought it's quite important, and this stays more with the younger versions of them than I think it carries on in the second block. But with the younger versions, I thought it's specifically important to also keep some sort of innocence and light as well. And their destinies are not determined yet. They could have made this in, and I guess they're not either when they're adults, but even more when you're 15, 16, 17. Yeah, Niall is 16 in the beginning, and Ruben is 17. I think in this age, like still there's so many possibilities. And I think they're part of what makes me engage is the hope that they could make the right decision and kind of turn to the right path. So I think this kind of innocence and also a joy between them, something to root for. I think this was really important for me to capture as well.
And how do you go about making sure you capture it, but it's in a sort of what's the word? In an authentic way? Because I was watching an interview with Richard and yourself earlier, and he was talking about like sometimes you don't want to capture someone acting angry, you really want them to be angry, but then also you want them capture like their sadness or their innocence. I think the actor who plays Niall has some of the saddest eyes I've seen, and he
Oh,
just there's just like moments where you just see it and you just think, oh, poor, you just want to give him a hug. It's like poor guy,
I know.
and just those
He
sort
that
of moments.
it's good acting because he doesn't have sad eyes in normal life.
No, but I bet you he's a bright kid and
Yeah.
upbeat person. But again, it's just different, and when you're acting, it's like different. But he just so much gets conveyed in his eyes and just what he's sort of seeing, and I guess as well because the show it feels like is in his point of view as well. You're sort of seeing how everything's played out, like in his life, and what's going on as well. And as you said, like they're trying to navigate what's at that age as well, because you don't know. It's not that you don't know any better. You just have a certain sense of naivety to it all, and maybe no life experiences as well.
Yeah, I think what I had a week of rehearsals with Stuart Mitchell, and we had. I really believe in a process with actors, specifically with younger actors, but to be honest, with all actors, which is open and free, and where people feel comfortable to say whatever they want to say and to question whatever they want to question. I believe in that morally, but I also believe in that this brings the best results. And we had the week where me and the boys were just going through every single scene in the script, which is very luxurious for a TV show to get this time. And we were just being very playful. I was kind of encouraging them to kind of play around with it a little bit, to not do the most obvious choice, to even if this feels right, why don't we do the scene where the opposite is true? Or why do we? I think it's about keeping things alive and creating a sense of spontaneity, because I think there is also a danger when you have a script like that one person falls. They're way too good actors to fall into that, but there is for everyone a danger, for all of us, that one person falls into I'm always the angry, scary guy and I'm always the sad, scared guy. So I think I was kind of looking for contradictions a little bit. Like also Niall can be funny, also Niall can be annoying, also Niall can try to, he's witty. Like he's not just like a scared like little 16-year-old. And I think and the same thing, and Ruben is also in some very twisted way full of love, and he's looking to help Niall, even if his help is very twisted and very probably morally wrong. But I think it's about finding those things and also getting, I think, being in the moment and not judging themselves while they're acting, like never thinking this is a bad thing or this is a good thing while I'm doing, but this is, I'm just doing it because I want to do it. So in a way, it's, I think they're not really supposed in each moment to play the entire character. I don't think it's their responsibility. I think it's our responsibility as then Richard as a writer and me as a director to tell the story of their character. But in the particular moments, they should feel alive and reactive and just reacting to what's going on around them.
I like how you guys are what you're explaining there as well is like they're playing in the moment rather than like the consequences of what's going to happen on that scene. So I guess like sometimes you could think, oh, if I overact on this scene, then maybe I need to be at, you're going to be at like 100% angry in the first few scenes. So then how do you ramp up to like 110 whilst they're sort of more reacting to each other and how they're sort of playing out. I think as well when you mention about the rehearsal period, because on like TV shows, I think sometimes you might be lucky if you get like half a day with actors, right, to rehearse, and especially where you have it's a two-hand of a show, and having that extra that week. I can imagine that it's like it can be very sort of you want to be precious with your time, but then also it could be so much fun because you're all there figuring out how you're going to play out the scenes. But then also that you know that the characters and actors are not going to be at 100% because they'll save it for when they're on set, so that they can still mold ideas. Um, What's your technique for when it comes to rehearsals? Do you allow them to play around and then you start making notes to say, actually, we can maybe change something just a little bit here or change the sort of nuances that they're trying to bring to the characters?
Different stages of rehearsal. I'm trying when I'm doing the rehearsals, if it's before the shoot, to not be too specific in terms of we're not actually rehearsing this is the beat here and this is exactly the length of pause there and this is they will not memorize this anyways, and also it will make it just contrived and not interesting, I think. So for me this week of rehearsals is more, it's like getting first of all on the same page who are even these characters, like who even are they, what do we want, how far does Ruben go, how, for example, I talked a lot, Mitchell and I were talking a lot about, because he also they obviously both of them, but I think specifically Niall goes through like a development where he starts as this 16-year-old teenager and is shy and nervous and scared, and then overall, and then later he grows into a student, and then he develops more of a moral core perhaps, or tries to. And I think it's also how, for example, Mitchell, who's obviously early 20s, how does he, for example, play a 16-year-old? Like, how does his body language function? How do we make a distinction between the different ages, and how is their physicality with each other? I very much believe in working with physicality. I don't think over intellectualizing performances or acting works for me often. I think there's some actors who find it helpful, and I'm very happy to do that with them, because I think it's whatever actors find helpful, I will adjust to, because that's kind of would make sense for me. But I think specifically with younger ones, or in general, I enjoy the process of talking about the physical aspect of acting and of relationships, because I think that's what makes things actually often authentic and real and visceral and immersive and open.
I kind of forgot about the whole movement side of things as well for a moment there because I was thinking more about like the emotional side, but you're right, that is also how is the actor going to move? If, as you said, mentioning how is a 22-year-old going to actually play a 16-year-old? Probably have to think about your posture as well and how different your posture is going to be compared to when you're slightly younger because you don't really notice those things or how you carry yourself in terms of like confidence because as a teenager and you're going through a transformation, how do
Exactly,
you,
yeah.
yeah, like how do you navigate that sort of side of things? And then again, little nuances like that, it's like completely forgot about that. And then it's like you sort of work on that and the way that they could move. But then that probably helps with blocking scenes when you're on location as well, because they can see what they're like as that age with the posters and what their rooms are going to be like and what their interests are as well. Yeah, it's a really cool process and cool to
And
it's
I think
good to
it builds
hear.
like a very solid foundation. I think when they feel in their bodies with each other and with themselves, then the kind of words are, and Richard is very specific about the words. I think the dialogue is like beautifully written. Like we pay a lot of attention to the rhythm of it, how in the moments when there is comedy, how the comedy lands and things like that. But I think when you do it and then when you watch it, it should feel as if words fall out by accident of out of these people's mouth, right? It shouldn't feel as if they're like precisely reciting dialogue. It should feel like a kind of extension of what they're feeling and what they're going through. So I really believe in building all this other foundation first, so you can be precise about the dialogue and you can work on nuances and how on meanings of certain words and things, which is obviously super important. But I think there's then more space on set to build those nuances.
I guess as well, like the way that you might stand up, you might say certain words because if you're standing up straight and sort of your chest out, you can project a bit more. But if somebody's like slumped over, they can kind of say things a little bit quieter, be like a bit of a mouse instead of a lion, for example.
Completely. And for example, I've been talking to Stuart. We took some stuff from this where that Ruben always has like so much going on. And he has this unpredictability to him, which comes from him also in some ways seeing, especially as a younger version, he sees the world is full of possibilities of what to do. And it always should feel he sometimes doesn't know himself. Will he hack Niall or will he punch him? So we were kind of thinking about him being very attuned and alive to loads of things going on.
And it's amazing though that just like hearing those things and just the ideas that you guys could bounce off of one another in rehearsals as well, and how you could bring the characters to life, and allowing the movement and the way that because there's scenes where they're very close to one another as well, so you can see a height difference, for example, or just the dominant side, and you can tell so much visually in that sort of way, and that also helps with characters building that up in the rehearsal period. Um, what I'm curious to know about as well, because there was something that you mentioned previously. I should have made note of that. Um, when you're playing with the characters and you're on set, when it comes to sort of blocking, because you spent so much time rehearsals, how do you go about blocking the scene when you're there to then shoot on the day? Because I can imagine as well, like your a shoot day, there'll be a shoot day can be quite intense. So even though all that work you've done in rehearsals, you want to make sure that you're ready for when you step on set.
Yeah, so normally I think like that filmmaking, or for me, and to be honest, I think for everyone in different degrees, filmmaking is just a balance of intense preparation, but then being very open and free to new things when you shoot. And I think the best results come from that. I think also just to, because it's such an important part of it, obviously, for the blocking is the concept of cinematography. So our concept with me and my cinematographer, Carlos, was to keep the camera. We had a very handheld camera, especially for the younger versions. When we then had the bookends with Jamie and Richard, we had a slightly more like dolly tracks and more slow motion things like that. But in general, we kept it a bit more, even more messy and fluent in the present day time. But messy and fluent in hand camera doesn't mean that we're just recording what's happening. It's obviously still very choreographed and very planned. And we had often ideas, for example, to say, we let's say it's a scene with the two boys in the room, and then we're going to keep it the camera reactive, but also, and I will block it, and then Carlos would be there, and then we would look at it together, and then sometimes I would adjust the blocking so we could do certain shots. So this was in general the process, but also we had ideas that in certain scenes we would say this is an image we want to achieve in the scene. So and normally it would be in this show only one image, because we wanted to create this fluent sense and sense of life and possibility. So we would then block, basically only force the actors into one specific position one time per scene to create this image, but otherwise we would let them kind of move around quite freely, actually. So it was a balance of those things.
And when you have your sort of style idea of like being handheld for the flash for the let's say flashback scenes, probably the best way to describe, compared to the let's say the flashback scene and then modern day where you have a lot of movement, and then compared to handheld, do you find that like you obviously can have fun with it, but do you find that sometimes as well that you might be a little bit constrained with that visual idea, or is it something that you just we have to be confident with it and accept that this is what we want to do, um, but we've got to make sure that we could just change it up every so slightly in scenes as well.
I in general think when I speak about concepts, it's just a general framework. I think again, like with everything else, there were scenes where we did dolly tracks and slow motion and quite like complicated development shots. Like I think for me, this is just a general describing this is the feel and this is what we're going for. And sometimes you might use completely different means to keep things interesting and to change it up. And also, it's always the way we do the camera is always in the end informed by the scene itself and the feeling we're trying to communicate with this specific scene. So I didn't feel restrained by it. I think it gives you loads of opportunities, and if it didn't, we would just switch it up and do something else. And I think I actually enjoy films who do that. I don't think just because you decided in general it's this kind of vibe, you have like to really stoically stick to it, because I think you do always what's best for the moment in the end.
Mm. And also, as you said, like you never know what could happen on the day. That you might need to change it up a little bit with the style, because something might not work, or you might not have enough time, or the lighting set up, or there might be too many mirrors, for example, on location that you could get in the way of the crew could end up being shot by mistake.
Exactly, and I think there are loads of, or there are other, or let's say you do quite a complicated sequence where we also had quite a lot of Steadicam. So we did a lot of Steadicam, we did a lot of handheld, we did dollies. To be honest, the most important thing, it kind of doesn't really matter how we technically would achieve it in a creative conversation. I mean, that's obviously important, but it's not how we first go about it. I think the most important things we were discussing was visceral movement, hard cuts from close up to close ups. I look quite a lot. I really like how the Safdie brothers um, go about their work, and we looked at uncut gems, this kind of very visceral feeling of being with the character and the nervousness of it. And it's just an inspiration. It's obviously not one to one translatable because it's a completely different kind of story. But we were talking about those kind of things and then breaking it down per scene. How in this particular scene we can achieve a similar feeling.
Yeah, and I think as well, like when you have, again, as you mentioned, Uncut Gems and Safdie Brothers, it's just inspiration of how they'll be moving things and how you can amp up scenes with just what's going on. I know they're two different kinds of films and slightly different styles, but you can have that emotion and creating that sort of claustrophobic feel for audience members of like what's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
what's ramping up. I think you
Exactly.
see that in like episode 1 when Ruben tells Niall to leave when he pulls out the knife, and you just don't know what's happened. You know something bad's going to happen, but as audience members in your mind, it just you start thinking like, did he stab him? Did he cut him somewhere? Did he do this? And then you see later on what's happened, and the bully tells Niall to leave Niall alone. Then you just see him, and you just think, wow, okay, this like Ruben means business.
Yep. He
But
definitely does.
but again just like it comes down to good writing as well, not showing what's happening as well, and
Oh yes, absolutely. That's obviously a writing decision. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and not knowing like what the end product is until later on. Yeah, it's cool. It's great. Um,
yeah.
I think I might have a few minutes left on my Zoom thing. I think probably about 10. So I've got two more questions that I'd like
Mhm.
to ask. What was your favorite scene that you didn't direct?
That I didn't direct.
Yes.
God, that is such a tricky question. I'm not sure I can answer that, to be honest. I need to think about it.
You need to think about it. Okay, we can always
Yeah.
come back to that. I think
Yeah.
it's always because when you have a show where you have multiple editors or block directors, always like to hear what their favorite sort of scene that they didn't work on, because there's always something that somebody would say, "Oh, I'm quite jealous that um, they got to work on that scene." But then
I mean,
there's
I think that because I think maybe that's a good way to see it. I think that the scene I don't really want to spoil it, but there's like an incredible scene in episode 6 when the two characters meet again, and I think because what for me is so important in the story is also the love between them, and I think you can feel so much, and I think the writing is so incredible in the scene, like when because it's so much about how much they hate each other, but also how much they love each other and the confessions they're making to one another. And I think this scene is quite extraordinary. So this scene, but I don't want to fully spoil it, so I think I'd leave it.
no, I'll take that. So at least we have an answer because I know it can be very difficult. Just because it's like picking your favorite child, but then I guess the next question is probably similar as well because it's what's your favorite scene that you did direct?
Oh my! Oh, there's this. I have to say this. Okay, so there's a in episode 2 there is a sequence after Ruben beats up Albi, and then we cut to black, and the Only You Jesus song comes on as Niall sits on the bench and Ruben is being put into police car, and then we cut to present day and basically until the big reveal at the wedding. And for me, this was just I just think for me this again like captures so much of this horror which goes on between these characters and the deeds Ruben does, but also this kind of strange, like tragedy of a love which could have become something if they just would behave so awfully. So I think that for me, it just captures this feeling so much, and I love the song, and I found it really moving. So I think that's one of my favorite scenes. I also think the two scenes, for example, in episode 1, I really love. when they're talking about the dad in the bedroom and then the weed smoking scene, because I think there's a real intimacy between them, which I really love. And then there's a scene in ep 3, the courtroom scene, which I also thought is again similar things. It's so contradictory in terms and ambiguous in terms of what you're feeling emotionally about what's happening. So I think those kind of scenes which have ambiguity emotionally but also intimacy, I think, are the ones which are hitting me the hardest, I guess, just personally.
Do you find with like something that has ambiguity like that, as a director, you can spend a lot of time thinking one way, but then also there's no necessarily right way of thinking about it because there's so much ambiguity to it. Or do you decide on what way you're going to stand to then shoot the scene?
I think to some degree it's your responsibility to decide a little bit how you're standing on this, because you need to, that informs your decisions how you're filming it. But then also you can also decide there's this side to this and there's also this side to this, and my decision is to show both sides because both are true and both are important to communicate, because that's then something, let's say, the character grapples with. So I think and then I would also say one scene is one scene, but then you also have the whole show. Maybe sometimes the show returns to this particular scene and we show it in a different light in terms of how the characters are reflecting on that. So I think it's both. I think you can't just keep everything open, because you need to make decisions to do good storytelling, I think, but also you could make a decision to keep specific things very open and to show both sides of the argument. People can to some degree decide by themselves, I think, what they want to take from.
I think as well it allows audience members to sort of discuss more amongst themselves because then you go on different chat boards or like Twitter or should I say call it X, sorry, and the way that people will be discussing what their interpretation of it is as well. And I guess that's like the whole point of art is to have that big open discussion about it and having that ambiguity and then maybe changing the perspective a little bit later on as well.
Yeah, and I absolutely loved it. I know some people don't read reviews or audience feedback, and they're trying to actually stay away from it. And I absolutely love it. I think it's so fascinating what people are taking from the show.
Do you find though as well, like when you have stuff like that, I guess there's always going to be negative and there's always going to be positive, but when you have stuff where people are taking things from the show, either if it's positive or negative, does that make you feel like you're noticing your work in a different light, or you're noticing things that you might have not noticed as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I can sometimes it's not even just if it's positive or negative, it's also sometimes people talk about the scene and they see something in the scene. For example, we didn't intend, or maybe we did intend it, but I couldn't find words for my own feeling what I was intending. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and it does let me see things in a certain way. Sometimes it also just lets me reconfirm my own feeling about it, because let's say somebody says something and I just disagree, or they say something and I agree. I find it a fascinating exchange to put something out and then hear what people think about it.
And then also, I guess people's like opinions can change week to week once they see more episodes, and
Mhm.
I guess that's the beauty of it as well. Instead of having it all released at once, you just have that conversation carries week to week, and then people notice more things, and then you'll be like, just wait until next week, and you'll see your opinion will change, or you might see something completely different, understanding of what's going on screen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Alex, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Half Man is streaming now on HBO Max in America and then on BBC iPlayer in the UK. Go out and watch Alex and her amazing team's amazing work. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You
Thanks.
take care and bye bye now.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.